step into the internet time machine, think 1990s.
Yeah,
I'll let you tell the
Link
specific
Exchange
times.
was founded in 1996 with my college roommate, and we specialize in online banner advertising, and grew that to about 100 or so people, and then ended up selling the company to Microsoft 2.5 years later in '98. And what a lot of people don't know is the real reason why we ended up selling the company. And the real reason was it just ended up not being a fun place to work at anymore. The company culture went completely downhill. When it was just I remember in the early days when it was just 5 or 10 of us, even when it was 20 of us, it was actually a lot of fun. We were hiring friends and friends of friends and working around the clock and growing in pretty exciting times. But we didn't know any better to pay attention to company culture. And at some point, we made one hire that wasn't maybe great for the culture, and then that person made other hires, and then just kind of when we went from 20 to 100 employees, the company culture just kind of slowly started going downhill, and just woke up one morning realizing that I was dreading going to the office of my own company, which is kind of a weird feeling. So that's actually why we ended up selling the company. And then with Zappos, that's actually what drove Zappos to focus so much on company culture from day one. And I think that would be my advice to all entrepreneurs, is make sure that you're hiring and working with people that you enjoy being around, and don't lose sight of the culture. It needs to be actively managed.
Yeah, I remember the summer before we launched Priceline, and I remember somebody coming in and saying, "This is the best it's going to be." Mm-hmm. And we managed to keep a really strong culture, but it was really poignant for us at that time, where we said, yeah, as we add all these people, every person, and you only have 10 people, the next person that comes in, 10% changes the culture if you're not really careful about it.
Yeah, and it has these ripple effects. So just even one bad person can
right.
infect other people's attitudes. And this, so part of it for me, for Zappos, was driven by just kind of selfishly wanting to, be around people I enjoyed being around. But what's interesting is books like Good to Great by Jim Collins or Tribal Leadership have shown that through the research, companies that have strong cultures actually outperform companies that don't, all other things being equal in the long run. So it's not just a feel-good thing, it actually is a good long-term business strategy.
And it's interesting you bring about strong culture. It doesn't have to be the same everywhere. It's a culture that works for that company. Yep. And there's a shared commitment around it.
Well, so the interesting thing from the research is, so for us, we formalized the definition of our culture into 10 core values. And values, I guess, don't, every company or person has values, whether they're written down or not, and they don't what they actually are may or may not match what's actually written on a piece of paper. But in terms of what they actually are, what the research has shown is that it actually doesn't matter what your values are, which actually kind of surprised me. It's not like such certain values are better than others. What matters is that you actually have them and you commit to them as an organization, and then you align the entire organization around those values. And the power actually comes from the alignment, not from what the specific values are. So there is no right or wrong in terms of what's the right culture or values. It's more what's the right fit.
And making sure that, as you point out, that the people coming into the organization buy into that notion.
Yeah, and what we found at Zappos is it's actually, rather than try to convince people to buy into certain values, just hire people whose personal values match the corporate values, and then they're just being themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I was thinking that there's a match between those values, and however that manifests itself is really important. It's particularly important because as companies scale, they go through periods of transformation, right? Where, as you said, at Link Exchange, you're only 15 or 20 people. That's a different set. Your objectives are different. Maybe even your strategy is very different than when you're scaling and you're going from $10 million to $100 million. There's a whole different set of needs, but the value should stay constant throughout that change.
Yeah, and I think that's the only way that, at least I can think of, that you can actually scale culture. Because if you try to manage culture top down, that doesn't scale. It really needs to be organic and driven from the bottom up and all around. And I guess the way I would think about it is, like, have you ever watched on the Discovery Channel, there's like maybe a flock of 5,000 birds flying over someplace in Africa. And if you kind of take a step back, it looks like the entire flock is almost like a single organism moving around. But the reality is there's actually no head leader bird. Instead, the birds live by very simple rules that's encoded in their DNA, like stay so many inches from the bird on the right, stay so many inches from the bird on the left. And by having those very simple rules, it actually enables, whether it's 50 birds or 50,000 birds to kind of move in unison. And I guess I view values in terms of company culture as kind of like the equivalent of the DNA for the company that enables a company culture to scale.
That's a huge, really important point. There's a book by a guy named Kevin Kelly, who's a Wired editor, called Out of Control. It was came out in the early 90s, and it talks a lot about that function of how flocks and herds and others behave. And as humans, we are that way too. So we get signals, whether they're real or not, from each other about those things. It's really, really cool and smart. Just by a show of hands, I'm gonna transition to one last topic, but just how many of you are entrepreneurs, started companies, work for startups, et cetera? Very cool. Okay, so about maybe a third, 40%. Awesome. Last piece around sort of Zappos, and as it relates to culture, acquired by Amazon. Obviously, Jeff Bezos has his cultural values and the things they've built at Amazon. Probably not that far off each other, but how has that been over the last, is it 3 years now since the...
It's been a little over 3 years, yeah.
So how has that worked? And I know that one of the things that was really important to you is keeping that ethos in the Zappos brand, but how has the intersection been? How does that work? If you can share.
Yeah. So the Zappos acquisition is actually very different from most of their other acquisitions in that, as a precondition, we told them that we would only do it if Zappos could remain independent and we could continue to grow the Zappos brand, culture, and our way of doing business our way. And so, unlike most of their other acquisitions, where even the plan is to fully integrate the company into the parent company, we've remained independent and then have integrated in certain areas where it makes sense. So, for example, in September this year, we at the time we're running 2 different warehouses, and Amazon has, I don't know how many,
to do
but
that.
A lot of warehouses all around the world, and so we actually thought it made more sense to hand over our warehouse operations to them, and then from our point of view, really focus on the things that differentiate Zappos, including our customer service and merchandising and so on. And so from our point of view, it's basically as if they're a combination of our board of directors, but also they're kind of this giant consulting company that we can tap into for free. So, but we, in a way, we kind of get the best of both worlds, I guess.
It sounds like a good fit and makes sense to take advantage of the synergies where they are.
Yeah.
So we're here in Vegas. You made a really big commitment over the last few years to not only invest your time, but really bring a whole group. You've touched on a little bit today, but why don't you just give everybody a sense for the downtown project, and if you have an ask of them to show up and do something, now would be the time to make them do something.
Yeah, so in conjunction with the Zappos move downtown, which is going to be in the next 8 or 9 months, separately formed a separate company called Downtown Project, which has a $350 million budget, and roughly how it's divided up. And this is just privately funded by myself and a couple other people, so it's not owned by Zappos or Amazon. And so the budget, the way it's roughly broken out, is $50 million to small businesses to help build a sense of neighborhood and community, $50 million to tech startup companies that are based out of downtown Vegas. So we've actually had a number of companies that we meet with and then find interesting, and then they relocate to downtown to be part of that ecosystem. $50 million to education. We're building an early childhood center that focuses on, and eventually it'll include K through 12, that will teach kids creativity and entrepreneurial skills and so on. And then $200 million to real estate. And so there's a few different goals. One is to help make downtown Vegas a place where you have everything you need to live, work, play within walking distance. And kind of the whole vibe there is almost, in some ways, it's almost the anti-strip. There's no gaming, and there's a real sense of community, and it's really the opposite of what you find on the strip. And another is to make downtown Vegas the most community-focused large city in the world, and also the co-working capital of the world, not just for tech startups, but also in culinary, photography, really anything that you can build.
Multi-sector, but same
right.
kind of approach.
Yeah, and then really have a bunch of interesting people from diverse backgrounds in a relatively small area interacting with each other and learning from each other. And so we kind of have this whole philosophy of trying to figure out how to get as many collisions amongst people as possible. And our guiding principles are, we refer to them as the 3 C's: collisions, community, and co-learning. And really everything that we invest in needs to somehow contribute to at least one or ideally all 3 of those, whether it's a tech investment, small business investment, or something else.
What are those 3 things again?
Collisions, community, and co-learning. And
you're looking for at least 2 out of 3.
Or ideally 3 out of 3.
Right.
But so just like at Zappos, when we hire people, we do 2 sets of interviews. We do the standard one, but then our HR department does a set of interviews purely for culture fit, and they have to pass both in order to be hired. When we make investments, not only does the investment need to make sense, but it needs to be good for the community and help build community. And we're looking for people that want to contribute to community. And then when people we're building a speakers theater. When people come in through town, they actually we have a whole bunch of furnished apartments set up as free hotel rooms, and then people might give a talk to the community, and so in some ways what's interesting is it's almost evolved into almost like a mini TED-like conference every single week now, and so that's been pretty exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So if the folks in the audience wanted to, how many of you want to relocate to downtown Las Vegas? Okay, so we got a few already. You make some more sales here.
Yeah.
Is there a way for them to get in touch with the right people in your team to know about what the options and opportunities are?
Yeah, I mean, one good option for today, so we have a monthly kind of update meeting, and when one just happens to be going on today, 4 p.m., 4 to 6 p.m. at the downtown construction zone, which is on 7th Street between Fremont and Carson, or come find me afterwards if you didn't have time to write that down. But also, I would just check it out during the day. There's the Beat Coffee House, which is on 6th and Fremont, and when you go in there, like, you would have no idea you're in Vegas. It's just a completely different vibe, and so it's one of those things where we really encourage people, ideally, come down, stay with us for a couple nights if you can, or if you're in town just visiting, and then rather than try to tell people to move here, we say come visit,
hang out,
and then the place just kind of sells itself.
So the construction zone downtown, 4 o'clock today.
Or actually, and then if you want to take a look at some of our past people that have come through, and we do a speaker series every week, go to downtownspeakerseries.com. We had a robotics guy come in last week that gave a really interesting talk on cloud robotics. Morgan Spurlock, who did Super Size Me, came through and gave a great talk. Or you can learn more at downtownproject.com.
Cool. All right, so we've got a few minutes, I think, for questions. Who's got questions here? Okay, 1, 2, 3. So right up here, and then we'll figure it out from there, okay? We got a mic for you. Hang on 1 second.
Cool. Hey, Tony, it's Kyle from Niblets. I had a question for you. Why Las Vegas?
So we originally, Zappos was based out of the Bay Area, and we relocated the entire company about 9 years ago to Vegas, and the original reason was because we wanted to build our brand around customer service, and no one in the Bay Area really wanted to do customer service as a career, whereas in Vegas, it's a hospitality, service-based town, lots of call centers, and 24/7.
Cool. Okay, next one right here.
Hi, Mitch Goldstone from Scan My Photos. Question for you, Scott and Tony. I'm wondering if the arc has shifted a little with customer service. I know with my business, like you, Tony, I'm so engaged with customer service, but I'm wondering, what do you do when someone takes advantage of your terrificness?
I guess for us, we have this philosophy that the customer isn't always right. It's the customers that we choose to have. And so, yeah, it's a very small percentage, but occasionally there are customers that say, well, keep ordering shoes from us, and because of our free return policy, they send back shoes that look like they've been hiking around the globe for 10 years. And then usually what we do is the first time we call them up and politely let them know that we're not a shoe rental company. But if there's continued cases like that, then we'll actually shut down their account, and we really leave it up to. A lot of it is we just leave it up to our reps, or sometimes, especially late night for whatever reason, we'll get some strange phone calls, and we actually have this this thing that I learned about relatively recently that I thought was pretty interesting, is that I guess our phone system has the ability to program in certain numbers, and then when those numbers call, because if they've had a history of being inappropriate calls, they actually get put into the abyss, which is like kind of an infinite hold forever. And so,
I mean, my experience is actually similar. Is that you go over the top sort of the first time and really be everything that you want to be, and then keep track of it. I mean, we're in an age now where we should have perfect knowledge about those customers, and don't tolerate abuse, because that's not what you're building your brand around. But I remember at Priceline when we first set up our customer service, you had those late night calls where they actually just wanted to talk to people. So I thought what you're going to tell me is that you've worked with the local social services to be able to take those people off.
No,
well,
we're
in all
happy to
seriousness,
talk
because
to
they tend a lot of that is lonely people. They're at home, they see an ad, they see something, and they call just because they want to talk to another human being. It's not because they want to waste your time.
Well, we don't mind talking to lonely people.
Well, they just would like to be ordering something.
We actually just set a new record for our longest phone call ever, which was 10.5 hours long, actually. So.
Wow. I don't want to know what that is, because it might take that long to determine. All right, one more, next question, and then anybody else questions? We go next one here.
Yes,
okay.
My name's Ben with M2 Teach. I want to thank you, Tony, for having a really cool company in that you empower your employees and you give them books to read too. But my main question is, do you let Zappos employees start companies, part off of, or encourage them to do so?
Do we encourage Zappos employees to
go start companies?
Our general philosophy for Zappos employees is we want you to do what you're passionate about. And so what that means is different things for different people. We have some employees that have worked in 6 or 7 different departments at Zappos. They're great cultural fits, but just haven't found the department or specific job that exactly matches them, and we encourage that. And then we also have employees, actually several employees now, that have left Zappos to start companies that Vegas Tech Fund has funded. And so I think, I mean, the simplest way to explain it is we don't want to trap people inside of something that is not perfect for them. We want them to follow their passions.
The next question is down here. Oh, you got a mic there. Just before, hold the thought 1 second. It's interesting what your comment about not wanting to go to work. As founders, that resonates for me. I found myself at times like, what am I doing? And so as founders or entrepreneurs in the room, like, be conscious of that and try to build something that never has that, right? So if somebody really wants to go start their own company, let them go start their own company, because the last thing you want is them to wake up and say, I don't want to go to work today. Go ahead.
Tony, thanks. So as an employee of a public company, there's certain stuff that you have to think about with regard to transparency that's probably different than, at least how you encourage people to live their daily lives at your company, being transparent, and also kind of how the future of technology is taking us towards a world where we're transparent all the time. So how do you think about that personally, kind of managing the trade-offs between, the aspects of your personality that kind of have to remain private, and the stuff that you kind of are okay with being public?
How as a public company do you deal with increased transparency?
Yeah, I mean, to be specific, personally, like how do you think about that? Not just as a public company, but how do you think about managing transparency
as an individual?
So both questions. As a part of because we're actually part of Amazon, which is a public company, and so I guess for that, we're super transparent with our own employees, and they know certain things like financials, for example. If those are leaked or let out, then you might go to jail, and so we tell employees don't go to jail. And then for, I guess, personally, it's I found that it's ultimately, whether I think as brand is about trust, whether it's the brand you have with customers or with employees, and there's different ways you can build up trust over time. I mean, one is literally that, just over time, whether as a person or as a brand, that's how trust is built, or through a referral or word of mouth from someone else that you trust. But aside from those two, I think the fastest way you can build trust is just by being as transparent as possible. And so I personally just err on the side of being more transparent.
Cool. One more maybe? Right here? Oh, we got one back here. One, and then you.
Hello? Okay, Amy King asks, given your stellar reputation for 4-star customer service, how much do you rely on word-of-mouth referrals versus traditional marketing?
It's a mix, and so our general philosophy is take as much of the money that would have normally been spent on paid advertising or paid marketing, and instead invest into customer service and the customer experience. And things like free shipping both ways are expensive, but really think of those as our marketing dollars to help build repeat customers and word of mouth. But on the flip side, if we know that if we spend for every dollar that we spend buying a certain keyword on Google, that's going to result in $10 in sales, then we'll spend as much of that as possible, because that'll automatically pay for itself.
It's interesting to think of customer service as part of the direct marketing mix itself, right?
Yeah.
Just like you'd buy a keyword, how do you do that? All right, one more question here, right here. Yep, Kyle.
Hey Tony, can you real quick on the startup side talk about ROC versus ROI?
Yeah. So it kind of just goes back to for the whole idea of investing in community, and most land developers focus on, well, they need to just cash flow wise make money within a few years, and really think about the short-term ROI. And kind of our whole philosophy with Downtown Project is we're thinking 10 years, 20 years out, and we talk about ROC, return on community, and because we actually believe that is the right long-term strategy. So certain things, like for example, the Speakers Theater, like we're taking the most prominent corner, the most prominent intersection in all of Las Vegas Valley, Fremont Street and Las Vegas Boulevard, and taking that building right there, and where we could have easily opened up a bar or a club or McDonald's, that would have made a ton of money, and instead putting something in there that's by design not going to make money. It's about providing, having speakers that are free to the community, and that in and of itself is not a great ROI, but it's a great ROC, and I think in the long term it's going to help the whole ecosystem.